Hi all, this is Patrick Smith, Chief Learner at IOTA, and today we're going to be doing an accessibility analysis of the output, the HTML output from a Jupyter notebook. And the notebook we're going to be using is some data from the cosmic origin spectrograph. And this is a output from a notebook put out by the Space Telescope Science Institute. And it's a pretty cool notebook, part of some pretty cool larger infrastructure around analyzing data from the Hubble, James Webb. These notebooks are available on GitHub. And I just want to say off the top of from the top that this is a cool notebook. The I would say that the information in it is very broadly accessible to blind and visually impaired. Of course, pictures can be quite difficult, and there are some other issues with how Jupyter Notebook creates HTML output. And that is kind of what I want to focus on in this video. Not so much images, because I think images are kind of a special case. I think that there's ways images and charts and so on can be improved. Um, However, maybe by programmatically creating alt text. Um, but I think that that's kind of a special case, kind of a special circumstance. So for now, I'm going to focus on some of the other um, HTML structures, and so we don't have the screen reader on yet. And so we're just scrolling through the notebook. This is quite a long notebook. Has a good amount of both markdown cells, so this kind of prose text, headings, lists, all that stuff that explains the code, and it also has a good deal of Python code in it. So I'd say this is a fairly good sample notebook. And if you'd want to take a look at this notebook, it's in the I'll put the link in the video description. And you'll also because this is kind of a pretty fast moving field, I want to make sure that I say the date. So today is February 27th, 2022. Maybe in the future some of these issues will be resolved, and we can hope. So I'm going to go ahead and turn on the screen reader, and you're going to hear the robot talking. And then we're going to go through and explore the notebook a little bit and just discuss some of the issues around how the HTML output in a Jupyter notebook does or does not sort of support accessibility for the visually impaired. And also just to throw it out there, so I myself am visually impaired. I have some low vision. Right now the screen reader is off. I can see shapes and stuff on the screen, and I do use a magnifier and a screen color reverser. So the screen color reverser has already been on. Maybe you've noticed that. The magnifier can zoom in and out. But for now, once we turn on the screen reader, we're going to use the screen reader primarily for interaction with this web page. Okay. So let's go ahead and turn on the screen reader. So we're going to be using NVDA, non-visual desktop access here on Windows. Okay. And so there's two things I usually do when going to a new web page for the first time, and to just get a little bit of a sense of how things are laid out. So the first one is interacting with the page by moving through the various headings on the page. And the other way I often interact is by tabbing. So using the tab button, which will typically bring you through different landmarks that exist on the page. So let's try the headings first, and then we'll try the tabs. And hopefully we'll get a little bit of a sense of how the page is laid out. We've already seen how the notebook is visually, but we'll get a little sense of it non-visually. So I'm going to press on NVIDIA. I'm pressing the H button, which lets me move through headings of any level. So I'm going to press the H button. Yep, and we need to
View data Google Chrome. View data. Heading level 1. Viewing COS data. Heading level 0. Introduction. Learning goals. Heading level 1.
So it looks like okay.
Viewing COS data. Heading level 1.
The first heading, and you'll see the visually that heading should be highlighted on the screen. Is
viewing COS data.
Viewing COS data. So that's the title for the whole notebook. Okay, and let's
learning goals. Heading level 1.
Learning goals. So assuming that this might be a list or something like that, it's a possibility. I'll just keep going through headings for a bit. That also was a heading level one. So typically you'd only want one heading level one in the in your web page, but it's not the end of the world if you have more than one. It's
0.
still
Introduction heading
fairly
level 1.
accessible. But it looks like all these headings are heading level one mostly.
Notes for those new to Python /1. Reading information heading level 1.
Yeah, these are all
Notes
heading
for those
level
new to
one.
Python /Jupyter/coding. Heading level 3.
And this one's heading level three, so we skip down to
0.
level
Introduction
three.
heading level 1.
But
Notes
so it
for those
looks
new
like
to
we
1.
do
Reading information
have
at 1.1. Investigating the data basics at
a good
1.2.
number
Reading in
of
the
headings
x1d/x1d some
to
main.
navigate by here.
Fig.
So
Fig 1.xs2. 2.1. Plot 2.1.2.
quite a
Xs
number.
2.2. Exercise 2.2. Choosing and
So
plotting.
you definitely can navigate. That's definitely something quite helpful using those headings to navigate. Then now, of course, wouldn't necessarily be available in all HTML pages that were the output of a Jupyter notebook. But in this case, the individual who created this notebook has provided a lot of headings to allow us to
2.1.2.2.
navigate.
Plotting and UV spec.
So the other thing I wanted to try was to use a tab to navigate. So I'm going to hit the tab button to see if there are any landmarks or anything that we can navigate by. So that's an alternate way to navigate around a page and get an overview of it.
Reading in the data link. Investigating the data basics link.
So
Reading in the x1d/x1d some main data link.
we're back at the top of the page, seems like. And it seems like
The association as an file link.
it seems
Displaying
like
the
these
data link.
aren't so much landmarks
Plotting an FUV spectrum.
as
Block quote. Our
links.
first plot link. A complex looking. Reading.
So I'm
Plotting
going
an
to
block
try to
quote.
skip
Examining
forward
the
a little
making.
bit.
Underspinning the block quote. Spinning the FU. Calculate. Block quote. Choosing a region. Calculating the SNR link. COS link. HST link. List with 2 items. COS data handbook link. COS instrument.
Yeah,
List
so
with
it
7
looks
items
like
greater than or
we
equal.
don't
Mass
have
link.
a lot
Key
of
link. Tutorial on downloading COS. Section 3 link. Normal. Anti-AD mode link.
we don't have a lot of landmarks in the document. So, and this is actually a kind of maybe one of the first issues we're running into with some of the HTML output from a Jupyter notebook is that by default, even though we do have these sort of natural landmarks
link
in
heading
the
level 2.
form
The symbolic
of
command. We can method. You
cells.
in the data. The proper unit list with 2 items.
Down
Bullet
here,
/s/cm /2 /out of met
here's
command.
a
The sim heading
cell
level 2
here,
seconds.
for
This NUV
example.
data was taken on 2009 08
But
14 starting.
even though we have these kind of landmarks in the form of code cells and markdown cells and some other kinds of cells, we don't. The output from the HTML doesn't actually put it into landmark form. Okay, so that's something to keep in mind. So I would like to try to find maybe I'll go back to the top of the document.
One notes for those. No previous heading.
And then I wanted to find a code cell and check out how the code is represented. Well, actually, first, since we have this, let's just have a look at this. So this looks like it is a table of contents.
One link reading in the data using Python.
So something I noticed while tabbing through there is
1.1
that
link investigating the data
it
basics.
seems like this isn't represented as a list. There are lists.
List with 2 items. Bullet
There are lists on this page, so I just skipped ahead to see if there are any lists on the page, and it does look like there are
list with 1 item. Bullet. You will frequently see
so that's a list with 1 item, which you usually wouldn't
list
want.
with 7 items. Bullet. To handle array functions. Version. List with 1 item. Black square. We want bullet. This is not always a good idea.
So it looks like we do have some lists. So it looks to me like the lists that are created in Markdown in a Markdown cell are represented as HTML. It looks like that first cell is
Note
not
maybe
wasn't the individual made this notebook maybe didn't use Markdown syntax for this. It's possible it's also the export from another program to create the table of contents, so that could be another reason. It's not because most of these are links. You could
reading in the data link, investigating the data, reading in the x1d
a little bit.
The association doesn't.
But we do see that something I'm observing here is that in general the Markdown parts of the notebook are fairly accessible. So we can navigate by heading.
Level,
We can navigate by the normal text, the text that doesn't have any special markup, like paragraphs.
Telescope link HSD with capabilities in the new ultraviolet NUV and far ultraviolet FUV. This tutorial aims to...
We can kind of see which things have like emphasis and stuff like that. So the story about that is pretty good, it seems to me. Let's see if there are any tables in the notebook.
Table with 3 rows and 5 columns. Row
so
1
here,
column 1
for example, is a table that is usually in a Jupyter notebook. There's a lot of output that is tabular because if you output a data frame and you run it, it will generate a kind of visual table. And it does look like output of that kind in Jupyter Notebooks,
Column 2 of ID.
in the HTML output from a Jupyter Notebook is accessible in the normal way you would anticipate with a HTML table. So
Column 3 object name.
you can
Column 4
navigate this
object type.
by it's labeled, the columns are labeled,
Column 5 file path. Row 2 spectral
and you
region.
can
Column 1
do
FUV.
the fact that rows are labeled,
Object ID. Column 2
and you can move
object
cell
type.
by
Column 4 3
cell,
C48.
and you can
Object name. Column 3.
move up, down, left, and right, etc.
Object type. Column 4 C.
So that's pretty. Its story around that is pretty good. I'm just gonna see if there
Table
are any
with 3
bigger
rows and
tables. It says
16
here's
columns.
a
Row
bigger
1 column. Column
table.
2 X. Column 3 error. Column 4 wavelength.
So
Column
quite a
5
large
column 6
table,
error. Column
but
7 error.
we can navigate through it using our the normal facilities given to us in NVDA for navigating in tables, which include you can then skip to the end of the table and move to the next item, which is very useful. So by pressing comma,
1.3. The association as an file heading
so
level
we
2.
move out of the table. So that's quite useful. Now I wanted to find a large code block, and I think there's one up above.
Table with 3 rows and 16 out of table
I'm
out
gonna try to
blank
move
variance
up to the
space no
beginning
blank
of
X1
this
data
table.
number display print
It's a
number
little
print basic.
unfortunate, it would be really nice to be able to tab to the beginning of the cell from here. So that having a landmark at the beginning of the cell where it says in,
Columns equals
I feel like would actually
information
be quite
in 7.
useful. So I'm having to move by hitting the up button like a whole bunch of times, which is, on maybe that doesn't seem like that big a deal, but especially when you don't know how long the cell is, that could be kind of a little bit stressful. If you say, for example, you have a cell with like 40 pieces of code, or sort of 40 lines of code, and then you keep pressing forward, and you're like, well, when do I get to the end of the cell? So it looks like when we hit a code cell,
information
so that's the cell, that's the markdown before a cell.
in 7.
So here, it's when we hit a piece of code, first it said in 7. So that is what it kind of says visually on the screen. It does seem to me like it could be useful to have some information on the cell, like maybe how many lines of code or something are in the cell, in addition to the normal run order that appears, the in 7 in brackets. I feel like a little more information that a sighted person would get visually when you go into a code cell could be useful. And if we move forward into the
Sum x1d data equals table.read sum x1d file path.
okay, so it looks like we are now in the what is a pre or code block that is representing the code, and we can move. Seems we can move through it line by line, I believe.
Columns equals sum x1d data dot col names. Number print basic info about the tables color print and table of FUV data with color number display representation of the data table.
So I can go line by line in this, which is not too bad.
Space.
And I can go character by character.
I-S-P-L-A-Y-K-A-K-R-E-T-R.
So that
E
seems
N
that
T
could
A.
be worse. I'm gonna try to leave try to skip all the code in it, by like the way we did at the table.
Not in a container.
So unfortunately that doesn't work. That is not so much a limitation with Jupyter Notebook export as it kind of is with how NVDA handles code and pre blocks of HTML tags elements, but there might be a way for a Jupyter the exporter in Jupyter to make a difference there by perhaps by wrapping the whole element in something that can be left, or using some fancy era values or something. So that would be really useful to be able to skip to the end of the code block without pressing the next button. Of course, if all the cells were landmarked, then that would also help with that a lot, because we could skip to the next to the end of the cell to the beginning of the next cell by pressing tab. So that would be very good. Now,
Blank. Table of FUV data
yeah,
blank.
and it says blank for blank lines, which is really not
Table
so
of FUV
bad.
no indent blank. 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 Variance flat. Variance counts.
And it
Variance
looks
DKG.
like
Net
it
background.
is
DK blank.
telling me a little about indentation.
Blank. Out 7.
It's a little hard for me to tell
Blank. Variance flat. Variance space segment. X.
how
Indent
good
blank.
it is
Sum
on
x1
the
data.
indentation. I would like to make sure that the indentation is represented. It would be great to make sure that is information that is coming through. That might just be screen reader dependent, however. And then so I guess holistically here, I think that there's some good parts to this. So all the markdown code, markdown in markdown cells is accessible. So if someone uses writes semantic markdown, has a hyphen and a space and to create lists or creates a table in Markdown or does something similar, it seems like it will get exported correctly to HTML. It is broadly accessible, and if people are using headings in their notebooks, then that seems to come through pretty well. It is kind of too bad that the individual cells aren't landmarked, especially since Jupyter notebooks, by being cell-based, by having that cell-based paradigm, they definitely do seem to lend themselves to having a landmarks at the beginning of cells. They're sort of like natural landmarks. It does seem like
Number disclaimer print 10 and number print
the
execute column in 7
summary at the
information in 7.
beginning of where it just says in 7. This kind of a little bit of a wasted opportunity. Like this, I feel like at the very minimum, it should tell you, okay, this is a code cell, and probably it should tell you what language the code is in, and then potentially it should also give a little more useful information, like how many lines of code are in the cell. And I also think maybe it wouldn't be the worst thing for there to be some more functionality at the beginning of the notebook. So at the very beginning.
No previous step.
I don't know that this is necessarily, required, but it seems like it would be useful to know as a blind or visually impaired coder or interested party looking at this webpage, like how many cells are there? Like how long is this? That could be useful information at the beginning. I don't know how required that is. But for example, this has a table of contents in it. Maybe there could be more facility for creating that table of contents semantically, so that it's represented as a list and we can navigate it as a list. That would be great. So I feel like the story here is a little bit of a mixed one. It is HTML. The information is there to be consumed as a blind or visually impaired person who's interested in this page, but maybe there could be a few things here that could be improved. And there's also, of course, the special case of visual output in from libraries like Matplotlib and so on. I do think that those are sort of a separate issue. Maybe could be dealt with in other videos or in other discussions. There's a lot of ways that could be tackled. It certainly is a pretty serious undertaking to make the images more accessible. But I think that there's probably some low-hanging fruit here in terms of HTML pages that are exported from Jupyter notebooks, and that especially the landmark situation, but probably a few other things could definitely be changed to make the output more accessible to the blind and visually impaired. So thank you very much. Hope hope to have more videos about accessibility in Jupyter notebooks and in the data science stack. Thank you. Have a good one.